To complete the square, we're going to have to follow a bunch of steps. We always start by moving the constant term to the other side of the equation. Do this mathematically correctly by adding the opposite to both sides. Then we group the x's inside one set of parentheses. Later on, we'll have both x's and y's. We'll factor out the leading coefficient to that squared term. And then, after that, we will take half of the coefficient for the non-squared variable. That gets written inside the parentheses with the x and the appropriate addition or subtraction, whichever was already in the problem. Then we have this exponent 2 on the outside of the parentheses. Now this is a very important step to make sure that you keep the balance. You square it, that number that you just have half of, and you multiply it by the leading coefficient, and then you add it to the other side of the equation. Once you've simplified that down, you have completed the square. But these problems right now want you to solve, so you still need to get x alone by getting rid of the furthest thing first. Remember, when you take the square root, you must write plus or minus. Here's an example. Let me talk you through it. We added 5 to both sides to get the constant on the other side. We grouped our x's. There was no leading coefficient, so I just took half of the coefficient of the non-squared term, and then I squared that, multiplied it by the 1 sitting out here, the leading coefficient, and then added that to the other side of the equation. I simplify that down, and then I solve for x. To solve for x, I have to get rid of the furthest thing first, so I take the square root of both sides. But when I take the square root, I write plus or minus. So x plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 14. If I subtract 3 from both sides of the equation, I get x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 14.